Please welcome to the show, Keith Fitz-Gerald. Thank you very much, Keith, for being on the show. All right. There's a lot of folks that want to tell you how bad next year or this year is going to be. Where do you stand on that? And are we looking at a recession for sure globally?
Well, two questions. Where the heck were these people last year when I said the Fed risked a depression and everybody laughed in my face? They're not laughing now. So, you got to take stuff like this with a grain of salt, Scott. Growth has slowed repeatedly in 2,000 years of reported market history. But what we have never had is growth stop. I don't think we're ever going to see growth stop. There's always going to be something that's positive. So I look at this with a very jaundiced eye. I'm very leery anytime I hear projections like this because everybody knows that it's going to get bad. But the sun does come up tomorrow. That's the key takeaway. The fact of the matter is, if anything, is if all these economists have suddenly realized we got a problem and they're 12 to 24 months late habitually, that submits we're closer to the end of this mess than we are to the beginning.
Let's talk about that for a second, because that's not my monologue. But where do you stand on how many more rate hikes you're going to think here and you're going to see here, and what do you think that does to the growth here? I mean, how much more slowing do you think we've got?
It's very tough to say how much more, but I think what we're going to see is 6 months of additional pressure because the Fed has still got more follies. It's got to prove its point, which we all know is complete poppycock anyway, considering they've already destroyed $60 trillion worth of market capitalization and aren't done, which we'll leave for another time. I think we're going to see 6 months of pressure. I think then at that point there's a significant risk that Powell comes up and goes, you know what? Remember that transitory thing that I was wrong about? Well, maybe I was wrong about rates and labor this time too. So I think actually, funny enough, we're going to have a strong finish to this year, but it's going to take 6 months of tough sledding to get there.
Yeah, a lot of folks are in that camp, and I kind of see the things, getting better. Well, as my father was in the business for a long time, he'd say, today's another day you don't have to do over again, right? Like get it behind you and let's get going. And I kind of feel like that way, going into the year here. But I also still think that we do have some things to worry about on the horizon. And one of them I still think is I think the Fed is going to overshoot. Are you in that camp or no?
I think the Fed is already overshot. And I mean, I think they're, it's like trying to play catch with somebody that isn't there. They've already caused not just the next crisis, Scott, they've caused the next 3 crises. Right. I mean, this is just, it's one of those things. Bull markets don't die of old age. They die because the Fed kills them. Not only did they kill them this time, they filleted it and grilled it. So, to me, we're going to be dealing with this for quite some time. I think they're going to hold rates too high for too long. What they need to do is pause, step back, say, wait a minute, is this really working? They need to ask some logical questions like anybody in the private sector would, but that's not what they do for a living.
And then lastly, I think that, we've had some of this talk about a lost decade, right? We're not going to see the returns that we did earlier, maybe the last 3 or 4 years. And they have been spectacular. I would say that I think some folks got used to 20-25% returns on some of their investments, i.e. real estate and some of the stocks that they're in. But I think that the NASDAQ proved them wrong this year. I think that we could be in for a little bit of disappointment going forward when folks see that we get to the end of this interest rate cycle. But then all of a sudden they only see 6, 7, 8% returns on their stock portfolio. What do you think about that?
Well, having lived through the S&L crisis and then the lost decade in Japan, as you know, spending part of my year over there for the last 30 years, I've seen this up close and personal on a couple different occasions. I think the key comes down to owning the right companies, the ones that have margin protection capacity built in, the ones that can change consumer behavior. So recession or not, there are always going to be stocks out there that are either going to hold water or continue to grow, recession or no recession. That's what I'm concentrating on finding right now.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great reasons why I love having you on is because you're an opportunist, right? You see what you can get done even when things are bad. Now, I've also said that you can turn that around and you could have bought the high every year in the stock market after the crash of 1929, and you'd be a very, very wealthy person right now because of what that's done over the last, 100 years almost. So that's something I also like to point out. So you think that we're either in a recession or about to go into one, and they've already overshot, and this then smells to me that you're looking for better news a little bit sooner.
Well, I am looking for better news. And, here's the thing. Historically, you and I have been in this game a long time. One of the things we also know from history is that those things in the market tend to bottom 2 to 3 quarters before the economic data does. If that assumption holds true, if that's right, that still points to a mid-year trough. So in the interim, I'm going to be looking for those stocks like the Pfizers of the world, like the Lockheed Martins of the world, for example, full disclosure, both of which I own, that are going to be very stable, have long dividend histories, and are continually growing. recession or not. They're not dependent on the economic data or what the Fed does next. That's where I'm going to look to park my money. That's where I'm going to look to accumulate stocks, because those things are going to come roaring out faster when the time comes. Hi, it's Keith here. Thanks for checking out today's highlight clip. What'd you think? Did I make sense? Is there something you'd like to add? Make sure you leave a comment down below, and of course, click subscribe to keep up right here on YouTube, or sign up for the email newsletter at the link below. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram for my real-time thoughts on markets, analysis, and a whole lot more.